Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Dikshan, are we on YouTube?
Just a minute, Harshal, are we good to go? Harshal, hello.
Yes, I see he has
Yes.
sent a thumbs up. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. Ma'am, shall we start?
Yes, please do start.
Very good afternoon, everyone. Albert Einstein said, education is not the learning of facts, but the training of the minds to think. With this wonderful quote, I would like to welcome you all present here and the people who joined us on YouTube for second episode of second season of the flagship event of Faculty of Management Studies, Deep Sea Talks, where we dive deep into the sea of corporate and community to discover shales and pearls of experience and infinite exploration. To be a student centric institute, imbibing innovative and lifelong learning skills, addressing societal problems is the mission of COEP. And we are driven by a strong core values of strength, truth, endurance, ethics, and reverence for all. I truly believe that the same will be portrayed by the first batch of MBA students as well. I now request my co-host Sudhir to introduce our guest.
Thank you, Mayuri. So, first of all, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce our speaker today. Our speaker for the day is an engineer, a researcher, an entrepreneur, a business leader, and much more. Sir is an aerospace engineer, has his bachelor's from IIT Kharagpur, holds a master degree from Virginia Tech USA. Sir has contributed a decade working in industry as an engineering professional, and a few of the organizations are General Electric, Government Research and Development Labs such as Vikram Sarabhai Space Center and BAC. Sir has worked on important positions in General Electric, such as MBB Patent Analytics and as Director of Intellectual Property. And then Sir took his entrepreneurial jump in 2010 and founded a startup called TeKIP Knowledge Consulting Private Limited, which helps corporate, universities, innovators to strategize around patent portfolios. So, without taking much of the time, I would like to request Mr. Vikas Dhar sir to guide us. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Sudhir. Thank you, Mayuri. Thanks, Akshata, and thank you, Tansen, for connecting me. Good afternoon, everyone. Uh, I think it's an honor to be able to address the MBA participants of such a prestigious college, very prestigious college in that part of the country. And I'm glad to talk on a topic which is essentially my story. So everybody loves to tell their stories, and I'm not an instructor, so I have my challenges around structuring a talk. Uh, but what I've done is essentially I consider it as a case study, and I'm here to just present the case, which is my case, and uh, uh, I'll have two parts to my talk. What I'll do is I'll probably go through what I want to go through and what I want to communicate in terms of concepts and um, relevant to the topic, which is you know precautions and learnings when you're doing a startup. Uh, so I'll do a first half of what I want to say. Be glad if I can then take some questions, because one of the things I'm when I was thinking about this talk, I was worrying about is how relevant will I be, because there are several things that we can talk about. I have been sitting through several talks. There are times when they are not relevant. There are times when they are relevant. But if you do a Q&A, typically I can dig into my experience and say a few things which you may value, and that may be more. So we'll do a mix of both. I'll probably stop at maybe 25 to 30 minute time, and then check in case there are questions. I'll answer that, and that's how we'll go forward. Else I'll just cover a few more concepts that I may have. Okay, so let me start. From where Sudhir left was I started my journey in 2010, uh, and what I do is patent analytics and patent management. Uh, so patents, as you know, is part of the larger basket of intellectual property, which is uh, essentially an ownership that an individual, an organization, or any other identity or entity get based upon uh, based upon their disclosure of what they have done and what they consider as novel. Uh, no, that's a society's way to incentivize innovators. Uh, People are investing time and money developing stuff. They want to have some returns. And what society essentially says is, you let the world know how you achieved it, what you achieved, and we'll give you monopoly on that for some time, or at least you will be able to prevent others from doing that for that period. And that's a business deal. So essentially, it's a technology garbed in a business. That's what it is, right? And that's what we do. We work with corporates like Sudhir mentioned, innovators, several startups come to us, as well as universities, because they have a lot of labs developing new things, and increasingly, even universities are trying to monetize uh, the kind of investments that they are making. So one of the good ways is to create a property, and then once you have created the property, um, you can uh, do various business deals around it. So we do that, and that's really my first. Uh, so what I'll do as I talk is I'll highlight some key concepts that I want to drive, and some of them will be, or most of them are something that I have lived through. But it's possible that some of them are those which are generic and which I've heard, but which I would have observed. I may not have the same kind of conviction about them because I may not have lived through it, but I would rather have you know about them. So here, what I'm talking about is a critical thing when you start, because all you guys are engineers, and probably have some ideas of doing a startup or as an entrepreneur. Since you would be a startup, you wouldn't have a runway, right? You would probably uh, uh, have to have one of the critical things when you start a business is the credibility that you bring to the table. And if you see my resume, for example, it was all 10 years in government institutions. Then again, next 10 years at one of the bluest of the blue chip companies, GE, but global research. I was in the R&D wing. So essentially, my 20 years before I started was R&D. So if I go and forward my resume and say that I'm going to be working on an area like patents, which essentially talk about technology and technology strategizing and things like that, it was easier to sell. I mean, people understood what is the connection between my experiences versus what I'm trying to do. So this becomes a critical piece, or displays a critical part in the success of what you do. Uh, I must point out at this point is, there are, in entrepreneurship, there are various kind of entrepreneurs, and I am one of them, or one kind of them. There are several kinds, but in this kind that I'm talking about, which is essentially working with technology in services, it is very important for the entrepreneur to have a standing before they can start getting the revenues in. Uh, there is this new business consultant. I don't know if you guys have heard. Maybe I don't know if it is there in your courses. But this guy, I follow his videos and things like that. His name is Simon Sinek. I don't know if you guys heard of it. He talks about some ideas. I've been listening to him for the last 7-8 years. So one of the things he's talked about is that people buy from you because of your why, of because why you do it. What you do it is incidental. So he talked about the golden circles where he talks about the inner core being why and then how and what. But it's the why part. So I'm addressing when I say credibility, background, blah blah blah. It's a why part. So whenever you think about an idea, you want to do something, or you are trying to. If you see a new startup, there has to be a question around why. There's obviously a money part. I mean, why? Why? Because I want to make money. That's probably the most obvious part. But we tend to see the unicorns of the world, and we try to think of it. Wow, Flipkart would have done what it did when Amazon was already there. It just copied the model, so it must be for the money. However, when you meet those folks who started it and the journey that they've gone through, you realize that it was not just like that. They got into it. There was a reason for it, and there was a clear why, which they had to convince the investors. So the guy who's going to put money on you for you to grow, or somebody who's going to join your team. You're going to engage an advisor, or anybody that you want to help you out in your journey. Will need to understand the why. Why are you doing this? And so it's very important to think through that piece. Yes, everyone can do anything. There's no doubt about it. But unfortunately you don't see. System is such, or the media is such that you don't see the failures. You see the successes. For everyone, trust me, there are several who didn't make it or couldn't make it. The ones who made it, also you'll have to study really hard to understand what is it that it's one thing to see a startup at a later stage of their growth versus seeing them at early stage and seeing what they are struggling with. So I'm assuming most of you are engineers, and probably a lot of your ideas will be in the engineering side, or do make that connection strong. You will have, how to do it. You will have your own ways to do it. Somebody will probably get a degree in it. Somebody will work in that area. Somebody will get a person who has that kind of background. Whatever it is, but get that credibility, because that's going to be the key. People won't buy you telling just about anything, and it is. People are doing it because they see successes, but it's not easy. So that's one concept that I want to talk about. Matching your idea with your background. It helps. It did for me, at least, that I can say. So that's one concept that I want to talk about. The other one, which I think is very important, it's very, very important, and it's got not got to do with entrepreneurship, it's got to do with life in general. See, a lot of things that I'll say may not be just for entrepreneurship. I think you can always see it with any classes, but they're generic. They are for any business. And life is also a business in a way. So it's important for life. So the concept that I want to talk about is self-assessment. It's and this is something that was told to me a lot by my father. Early stages, you should try to know as much about yourself as you can. Not for a specific goal. I'm not even telling with that what will you do. You will know what you will do with that. But try to understand yourself. There are small things that make you understand yourself. For example, I just gave an exam in class 7. Do I know how much marks will I get? My ballpark, or do I get surprised when I get my result? It gives you a feel that I got my feet on the ground, or I have problems knowing reality. So small things. You play a game, get into one-on-one badminton. I don't know what. You know about the other opponent. Do you think I'll beat him at the end of the match? What was the result? Was it close to what you thought, or was it too far away? You tell somebody I'll be there at 9 o'clock. How does that pan out every time for you? Does it pan out? You make sure that you are there. Now, the reason why you got to do all this, and this is like life, right? You keep understanding yourself, is you won't have all the skills. Trust me, nobody has all the skills. And it's possible because of 100 reasons, because the way you brought up, the way your background was, your surrounding was, you may develop certain qualities and may not have certain. The reason why it's important to know or self-assess is you can complete the picture if you know the picture. It's like being on a map, knowing where you want to go, but not knowing where you are. It's so frustrating. You have the entire map laid out in front of you. You know exactly where you want to go, which is like become a unicorn in 10 years. But where am I on this map? How far do I have to go? Is it very far? Is it close? That essentially a metaphor for what kind of things I need. And there are several hundred things that you can make a list about, but definitely start with yourself, because that I think is going to be a very key thing for anything. And towards the latter part, I would like to talk more about people and things related to people, because being in services, I have had to focus a lot more on that rather than the technology of the product and things like that, which typically product outfits do. And a lot of learning has come there for me, but all starts with understanding myself, what my strengths were and what my weaknesses were, both of them. Large outfits, corporates, as you will see, they start investing in leadership and all to do various kind of methods to understand them. They do Myers-Briggs, they do this kind of mapping, that kind of mapping. They want to profile the leader in terms of his or her understanding of herself, her strengths and weaknesses, because then they can deploy them in the right person. By the way, you are the management here, you are the leader, you are everybody here if you are doing a startup yourself. You got to figure it out yourself. Nobody's going to help you. It's good to develop that habit of accepting your strengths and your weaknesses, and then going ahead and fixing it. So, self-assessment, I thought I will cover, because that has, for me, that has been the biggest piece in of the puzzle, because there are enough folks around you. We all have friends. Tansen here, Tansen and I joined Tansen, probably you're just out of your PhD, right? 2002, this guy gets an award for great connector. Okay. And I think 20 years from now, 20 years has passed. I don't know what kind of connection network he has today. You can't even imagine, because somebody who's good at that stage, when he tries to refine his skills over years, you can't imagine what kind of things that you achieve. But the idea was, there was a system which told, hey, it's your strength. This is where you are fantastic at. And then what happens is, when you go ahead and start setting something up and doing, you know where your strength is. This stuff I can take care of. By the way, this may be something I may not be good, so let me get somebody to do that. So that is my hint on, some of you may look at your friends or co-founders and stuff like that. That is what you play. The big thing about technology and business knowledge, operation, those are okay, those are fine. That's what the books will tell you. But people can learn anything, especially at your age when you guys are just starting. You guys can learn almost anything. But you have your strengths. Your weakness may not remain your weakness, but please, identify your strengths which you can enhance. That's going to be a very important part of the journey that you will see. So I wanted to talk about that. And there's no harm in dreaming. People make vision statements. People make larger dream statement where they want to achieve. Always very difficult to achieve. Unless you see the dream, you won't be able to accomplish much. But that's like where you want to go in the map, right? And then you start connecting it, and it's a question of execution after that. Everybody will form a team. If nobody, folks like me, when I started, and like Sudhir said, I started after 2 decades of work, right? So there is a kind of it's not an apples to apple comparison with you people, because I kind of started after 20 years of work, and so there are those those drivers then. But essentially, at that point, you're trying to make sure that there is no way that you want to fail. Versus at this point, you guys should fail quick. You can take chances, but fail quick, fail early. See dreams executed may not work. Pivot. That's the word that I'm sure you guys use in your lingo. But pivoting in a startup is very important. Having the facility to pivot. So all of these things are connected, right? So if you're a person who doesn't change a lot, who's a very, it's not exactly true, but it's a kind of a process-driven guy who's likes to stick to the process, like to stick to then have someone who's ready to switch and somebody who can influence that and somebody who can drive that in your organization, right? Because you will go with what you have and you'll try to stick with it. So there are advantages of when you're starting early, trying to try things initially based on the dream that you saw. But form partnerships, get people in place. If somebody like me, when I started, like I was telling, my partner was my wife. She was the one who knew very well whatever I may imagine my strength and weaknesses. She would tell me straight away on my face what my strength and weaknesses are. And by the way, if I was ever going to get startup, I need buy-in from her. Because if I do a startup and I keep listening to that every day in my home, that I don't know what you're doing, you should better be working, and blah, 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 gone. I mean, that's something nobody can stand. So your teamwork starts there itself. You guys are more your inputs will come from your mother, father, siblings. Do take that, very valuable. They are the ones who know you, they understand you. They may have their agendas and things that they want to you, but they are the ones who can hurt you because they know where your weaknesses are. They are the ones who can really boost you because they know your strengths. Take those inputs and start forming those partnerships right from that point, because those are the things that will give you. It's important to start early, start well, because every time restarting does take some energy out of you. I've seen, and this again, like I said, I'll talk about some concept that may not have happened to me, but I've seen folks. It takes a lot of energy out if you kind of have invested in an idea for some time and you got to redo it. I've seen they go through difficult times, but then they pull themselves up together and come back if they have the right kind of support and right kind of friends and things like that. So it's important to and Tansen will definitely vouch for this, is do your define phase as extensive as possible. You are not in a race, trust me. You're not in a race. You may not be the first one, as you have known you must have seen your case studies. It's probably seldom the first one who reaches the success. First ones are first ones. They are the ones who thought of it first. They are the innovative kinds. They'll try it first. So if your idea the newest, the best, most unusual, may not be. Because there are several things that will work as you will go forward. But it's important to kind of start early, make mistakes, and keep going on that path. So that's the other part that I wanted to cover is kind of start forming teams around you first. The next thing you do is with friends, and I'll talk a little more about friends in my later part. Friends and relatives. There are some pluses and there are some minuses that happen with some of those, which I have observed. But that's what typically folks do in their thing. The other thing, like I hinted in the discussion right now, is often stated, it's a marathon, not a sprint. uh, easily said than felt, because people in the startups, and a lot of them are bootstrapped to start with. You don't have people taking calls on you. There are difficult days that you go through. You have a team. You have to give them salaries, and you have to support them. And you are the one, because your vision, they came on board because of you. Um, but yes, you have to remember that it's not just tomorrow that you got to plan for. It may be a year, 2 years from now, 10 years from now. You may still be on doing this. Uh, Tansen talked about the example of your previous person who's been doing this for 15 years. I've been doing it for 10 years. I may have started with my dream. Have I reached it? No. Is that reality? Yes. I'm somewhere in between. But I'll keep pushing. I'll keep some of my aspirations for later, some aspirations today. But that is the journey. So that's what we try to refer when we say it's a marathon. You've got to feel the race itself. It's not about finishing the race. Race will finish when it will finish. But you have to have the mindset of, let's start. It's okay to take time to define. Let's see what we have, what are our strengths and stuff like that. It's also important to see what can go wrong, to the extent that you can. Reach out, talk to people, see. I guess you're getting an excellent training there in terms of several case studies to see what can go wrong, what can go right. Think about that. Simulate, shadow, do all those things. That's all in the define phase that you do. Because once you get started, you get started. You don't want to. No one I've seen who was passionate, who started, gave up so early. Nobody gave up. But not giving up early also can have its own impact. We talked about to fail early, but people take failures not very easily. They continue, uh, they kind of put in resources, sometimes which they wouldn't have originally planned for. They burn up their relationships at times. All those kind of things happen initially. So I'm basically hovering around your initial phase, that when you start, because that's what I think some of you would have probably already done, and when you came for this course, or a lot of you would probably want to begin. These are some of the things that happen in the early stages uh, of a startup. So marathon, not a sprint. Don't have to be the first one. The fourth thing that I want to really say is, whatever you do, because being a startup, one thing you will have to do is pitch, 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 and pitch. Again, probably more in the initial phases, a lot more in initial phases, maybe not so much after you have already established yourself. But the key thing is, make your pitch simple. You should be able to explain it to your mother what you do. And imagine trying to explain the patent analytics to my mother. But eventually, I had to reach that point if I'm going to be talking to different people. It's easy to complicate, difficult to simplify, but that process of simplification will bring a lot of insights for you. And it is more of a metaphor right now, because it's not just about the idea I'm talking about. It's how you'll execute it, how you will monetize it. Investor will ask all those questions, and the simpler and more plainer words in which you will talk, it's easily communicated. So a lot of learnings I will say will be from in my last job in GE, because there some things it did fantastic. Teaching although it was a large company, but prepared you for some of these things very well. So they used to talk about elevator speech there, which is essentially they told your CEO is coming down in the elevator with you. You have 30 seconds. How do you say what you do? Essentially, it boiled down to simplified communication, in which you are able to communicate the impact as well. This is something you will have to do for your employees, for your partners, for your investors, for your people for a network who can help you will say, okay, tell me quickly, what do you guys do, man, so that I can spread the word around. Now, for somebody like Tansen, I have who has a PhD here, he exactly understands what I do. But if I have somebody who's probably selling something else, and I'm trying to say, can you help me? And it's possible that person is meeting a lot of people who can be my potential customers, but I got to make the message that simple. My employees every day ask, so after some time you'll always have competition. So how are we different than the competition? What is it that we do? What is it that what is the message that you have for us? What do I tell folks? Messaging is what you'll have to do as someone who will do a startup. Making it simple will help. Keep that mindset of making it simple. Initially one tries to. There is a feeling of trying to say things which are impressive, which is great, but after some time it doesn't help. You've got to make that impressive simple. Keep it impressive if you can. If you have the facility of the language and expressions, please do. But make it understandable, communicable, and there's a related concept that whenever I talk to communication is this again something that came from G. There's nothing called over communication. So when you will start talking to your employee, you will think that I've told him once, doesn't he understand? But he may not. It's like talking to you guys are very young, but bring up children. That's what will happen. You have to keep telling. You have to keep explaining. You have to keep making it simple. Find examples. Keep trying to convince. The more you do that, you convince yourself. By the way, that's a process of convincing yourself. If you are convinced, and when you go in front of a set of folks that you're trying to make them see your way, it is important that you feel inside that you are convinced yourself. So there is a big premium on messaging. That's essentially what I wanted to say. I mean, self-assessment, messaging, and the credibility part. These are three things that I said, which to me are key things that you need initially when you get startup. And this probably will take all your time before you are ready to kind of reach anywhere. Now, when you form a team, there are several other concepts that start coming in terms of engaging your team and engaging your partners, engaging your others, which I'll talk about. At this point, before I go to that, there's one more point that I wanted to, a lot of youngsters, from what I've talked, maybe in one-on-one or some of the investing machine, they do feel that the startup is about convincing the investor, raising money, increasing valuation, getting bought out. Yeah, essentially these are the 4 steps, right? That's what you do. But when you actually get into it, it is going to be everyday grind, which is what will take up your time. And it's good to, when these may be your larger goals eventually, especially on the product side, building yourself up to be able to handle those responsibilities is going to be the key thing. You'll always have consultants, you'll always have people who can help out on all these aspects. Trust me, there are enough folks and mentors or networks out there who can help you, but translating it to your benefit is something will go through you. If you don't develop those skills, or you and your team, it will not help you. You can be as networked as you can, but if you don't have those, develop some of those skills, it's going to be a tough one. So that's the one that I thought it's 4 or 5. I thought I wanted to take a break here. I have covered some of the top 3 or 4 concepts, which I think are going to be very useful when you guys get into a mode like this. At this point, if you have any questions for me, please ask. What I'll do is I'll try to answer them and give you some relevant answers. And there are a few other concepts which I'll weave into these answers. and communicate to you. But at this point, I would like it to get more, more relevant for you. So where are you guys right now in terms of your entrepreneurship journey? I know you guys have just joined this. Uh, so what is it that you joined this program for? Do you have things in your mind which you think I will be able to address some of those questions?
Yeah, so sir, like you covered the self-assessment part, right? So sir, with time we tend to lose the hold of ourselves, or we tend to get when things get off track. So sir, how frequent? I mean, what's the frequency of this self-assessment should be, and how do we get to know that okay, things are off track right now? So how when we need to get back on track? So how frequent should this self-assessment should be?
Uh, Knowing yourself is a constant exercise. It's not a toll gate that you reach and you've crossed. It's a constant exercise. I mean, as you can appreciate, you can keep coming to know about new things about yourself. The important part is the reason why I talked about self-assessment so much uh, is it helps you uh, accept or see qualities in others in the right light. It takes you away from competition. It takes you towards collaboration. There are some of these things that we are talking about in self-assessment. What we used to talk about, again in corporate life, we used to talk about them in terms of values. Or these are our, the how we work part. It doesn't change very easily. So whether you like it or not, self-assessment is a lot about knowing as is where you are. What are your strengths today? They don't change overnight. The off-track one, I guess what you're talking about is maybe you have your hands full, or some four things are not going your way, so you got disturbed and things like that. But those are the times when your self-assessment would help. For example, if you're confident about your qualities or the strengths that you have, small failures or will not deter you. You will not go off track so easily. You will see folks who are, you tend to believe this guy is very, what do you call, a shant type ka aadmi, he doesn't get disturbed so easily. What is the trick? How does he go about it? It's being at peace with yourself. It's what it comes is you understand yourself. I cannot do everything. The things I do control, things I don't control. And here are my strengths. By the way, if it's about tomorrow I have to get 10 people here, that's my strength. I can do that. But if tomorrow I got to teach these people this new thing that I'm trying to do, well, I'm not a good teacher. It's a small thing, just to know that. You may be a brilliant person yourself. You may be a great technologist. I'm not saying that, but not every technologist becomes a teacher, right? I mean, it becomes very difficult. So you kind of, if you have to get that skill into your team, you look at somebody else to kind of, somebody else help to do that. So a short answer to my question is it doesn't break, it doesn't start. It's a continuous process at every stage, which is why I gave the kind of examples I gave. For example, do you reach a place at the time when you claim that you are going to reach? Some of us always know that how much ever we plan, there's always a 5-minute data because of something that happened. Well, account for that. That's all. Or when you're talking to somebody, when you're meeting someone, or trying to achieve, just tell that give and take 5-10 minutes. It's a great thing to say that that I accept that I have absolutely. It's not about feeling bad about your weaknesses, but it's about knowing. So my whole point about self-assessment was then you will form the right team. Anybody can achieve anything. That's what I believe, and I'm sure you have heard a lot of times. Provided you know where you are. The same metaphor is, if you know where you are, you can reach anywhere in the map. But knowing where you are, about self-assessment, is the most important part, and it's a continuous process. So don't feel like, okay, today I'm in control, tomorrow I'm not in control. So I need to understand why I'm not. It's a continuous process. It's not something that happened today. What has happened today is not just about today. It's about you. If the same trigger happens some other day, probably you will respond in the same way because you are you. It's a much bigger thing to train yourself to respond in any other way. Now, that will get into areas that I'm not even talking about. Yoga, you do all that, to change yourself. I mean, I'm not going there. This is not about that. This is knowing about what you are. It doesn't matter how you are, what you are, but just knowing what you are. Because then you can build the right team around you. And it's okay, whatever you are. I mean, that's not like like I said, anybody can achieve anything. It's not like but everybody has blind spots. Everybody. How much the best leaders have had blind spot. Interestingly, in our GE, so you must have heard about the celebrated CEO Jack Welch, who used to be there, and he was followed by another very famous CEO called Jeffrey Immelt. They had even from an employee who was not in the senior leadership, I could still observe that they seem to be different. So the same organization has actually gone to different people to lead it. That's because the organization understands and believes it's a very old organization. It knows that anybody, just about anybody with the right kind of strength and right kind of team can lead. And there are times when one set of qualities are needed. There are times when another set of qualities are needed. And the same will be true with your startup. There are times when one thing, at least in service, what I've seen is I get swamped by work at times, swamped with work. It has to be delivered by 3 days. And if I'm not an execution guy, I mean, when mere haath pav phulte hain, when a lot of work comes, I will look at somebody who can do it, and he'll say, "Yeah, don't worry, and he or she will work entire day and get it done." I'm better at getting new customers, or better at talking to some people, or better at motivating, and better at but actually doing, maybe I'm not the right person. So, but it's okay, not a problem. It's not that I have to develop that the quality of delivery. Yeah, that you do in your spare time. Try to become a practitioner. Try to improve that skill. Like I said, your weakness will become at par at most. It will really not become your strength. I mean, your strengths are a function of several things in your life by the time. And there are some things that you will try now may become your strength several years later. That's a different exercise, like I said. That's not what we are referring to here. Yeah, so good question. I think self-assessment is probably, if there's one thing that you can take away from this talk, I think for me it's self-assessment. Any other question here?
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Sir, what's your secret ingredient for an entrepreneur, or what did you follow?
Nothing really, nothing specific. The way I've been talking about it. Actually, I was a accidental entrepreneur, if I have to say that. After 20 years, you don't plan to be an entrepreneur. I mean, yeah, some people do. I'm not saying. I'll not make any statement which is, final. But typically, when I started, I had a 11-year-old girl, a 6-year-old boy. I mean, G would give me a 1-year-old car, new car. So there was mortgage, there was house mortgage. That's not time to do entrepreneurship, right? So there's no secret recipe. But what made me do it is knowing that at this point, if I go back to the industry, for whatever reason I had to leave it, if I go back to the industry, I'll probably do more of the same. And my driver at that point was, is that what I want to do? Or do I want to, so it's interesting question because it's not such an easy answer to say, what I started with. But it's a long process. You start thinking uh, whether next 5 years, if I keep doing what I'm doing, will I feel good about myself or should I try something right now? And that decision is not mine to make, as you can understand the state that I was in. I had a family, I had other folks and family. So everybody will have to be bought in on my idea of doing it. In fact, it was more my wife who was my support than myself. I had several self-doubts at that time because when I did come from central government job to a GE, which was anyway on that scale, they are on the two opposite sides. But entrepreneurship was something else. I was not sure how well, but like I said in self-assessment, there were some things I knew I had, and when I talked to folks, just like we are discussing here, I realized that there are few key things I seem to possess, which I said, which was my resume when I looked at it, because that's the time when I was doing a trade-off between job and entrepreneurship. And I look at my resume to think where I should apply. That resume says only one thing: you can only do technology because that's what you've done, and then R&D with little bit of leadership here and there, but it's going to be technology R&D. So that way, my transition was going to be smooth. That I knew. If I take up this, I had to do service exactly for that reason. I could not go for a product because product has a very different cycle. So typically they talk about the innovation trigger, and then peak of inflated expectations, and then trough of disillusionment. That curve that goes ups and down, and that after that is where realism sets in. Typically with all products, I could not afford it, so I went for a service model where I can keep getting money on a regular basis. But that doesn't, like I'm saying, that should not define you. So I did start like that, but then I had ideas of my products. So I incubated an IT team within my company and I started working. So anything is possible. Anything. It's the starting point. You should be clear. My recipe was my resume. I've done the patent analytics piece in G. G had taught me. I was, like you said, also the process guy for them. So some of the processes I had set, so I had confidence that I can set it up again. Over times, I had great friends around me. My network. In 20 years of R&D, you do build networks. So those were my recipe. That if I start tomorrow, I think I will get a start. And once I get a start, I can build. Execution to the Shan point, execution was my self-assessment that I'm good at execution. So if I get into it, I'll execute. Starting was not my strength. Starting something new was never my strength. I needed a lot of push from behind, from my family, from friends, from here, there. But once I got going, I know I can get going. So my secret recipe was self-assessment of my strengths, my resume, which I had done, the idea that I was going to start with, the service model that I was going to work with. Those were the reasons that I started. With, and then I realized as I kept going, is I could do anything. I don't have to be limited to what I started with. I could try this, I could try that. Yes, it's all a question of resources. And yes, in 10 years, I have not picked up funds. I'm mostly bootstrapped, but that's also, it was possible because I was a services model. But whatever was possible within the things I have tried. And I'm still trying. 10 years is nothing. Like I said, it's a marathon. Anybody who I was hiring or I was talking to, I was telling, it is not my goal to sell this business. My goal is to be with this business and grow it to wherever it goes. And that is typically the mindset with which you start, because you have to assume it's a marathon. You can't assume that quickly by next year I'll reach this billion and I'll sell it and then it happens for some. I will not say it doesn't happen, but for most it doesn't, unfortunately. And you don't want to be a statistics, right? And you want to be, if you start, you want to be there. So good question, Sudhir. I think we've lost him for temporarily, but that was what I started with. Thank you. Any other question?
Good afternoon, sir. I just have one question.
Sure. Go ahead.
How to not be deterred by competition? Because everything that we think of going into, there are already competitors present who are doing the same thing for quite a long period of time. So there's a sense of insecurity every time we go. Like, will the customers put their faith on us when there's all someone who's been doing it for good 10 years? So how to not be deterred by that, and what should be our attitude?
Good question, Sarojit. So again, like I said, I'll answer a lot from my experience. I am not. When I started, there were already 150 outfits doing what I was doing. 150 outfits. It was a services organization. There was some large ones who had started and people who had left them and started on their own. The barrier to entry was not very high for this industry, for a technical guy. But at the end of the day, when you are starting or you are thinking to do something, I'm sure you have some idea of what is it that you want to offer to the customer. What you typically, I'm sure in your subjects you learn as value add that you will do. What is the value add? Because without a value add, one is not an entrepreneur. I'm not doing a value add to the existing system. I'm not an entrepreneur because I'm just somebody and probably I will not survive also. So there will be a USP. There will be something that you know that you can do something little different. You may be unsure about what you may be unsure about is what is the impact of this USP that I have. Will customer accept it? Will I be able to position myself? Now there, what I've seen is, I was talking earlier about self-assessment, pivot quickly, fail early. But the question that you're asking at the end of the day will probably stop at whether you think if these customers were not around, you would still be doing what you're doing, and you think you will be adding a huge value to what you're doing. Do you have that confidence or not? Because once you get started, frankly, you will pivot, you will change, you will offer what you have. And by the way, some of the answers of these also lie in the market, size of the market, and blah blah blah. Some of the other things that you will have to answer, which is more. It's not so much philosophy; it is more detailed that you will have to analyze. I have not covered that piece because I assume those are things which you guys do in your courses, in terms of what is the scope. But in terms of your value that you're going to add to the industry, that is a confidence that you need to have. And do you have a reason to have that confidence? I talked about the match of the background with the idea that you pursue. My confidence came from the fact that I had done it within GE. I knew that there are some new things that I have in mind. I knew there are several players out there who don't have the advantage of the experience that I've had, and I'll be able to bring that out. But knowing that story, knowing that USP story is very important. If you have not, and that will probably also come to your messaging, simple messaging that that your first employee will ask you. And my first employee asked me because he came from an IP services organization. So you are starting now in 2010. This industry started in 2003, 2002. What is it that we'll be doing different, sir? And you have to answer that question, and that question you answer yourself. But if you are convinced on that answer, trust me, it does not matter how many competitors are there. It does not really matter, because over time you will create a niche for yourself. You will be smart. You will have a smart team. You will figure how to position yourself. There are several tools, several people, several things that can help you do that. But the starting point is you and your confidence on what your USP is. And that is where I think, and I was thinking about if I were as young as you guys are, and just 2 years of work X, and I'm going to do a startup, how am I going to decide what startup it is? I mean, to you, I think, is it possible that idea of startup is the biggest roadblock? Because for me, after 20 years, idea was not the roadblock. My roadblock was how will I get money every day, right? But it's possible at this point, if you are in a stage where idea itself is the biggest roadblock, then you got to think hard. Because you just don't want to jump on an idea which somebody says one day and it looks very sexy and nice, and then you start thinking, oh, there are so many people working in it. How will I make a? But that's because you're not thought through. It is not an idea which germinated in the right way. You have not experienced it. You've not felt it. You've not talked through. You have not. Somehow you don't have an advantage on it versus others because it didn't grow in you. It just came from somewhere, and which is why you're having these doubts. If you would have come from within you, if you would have lived it with your friends, like for example, 4 friends you're talking about, after a few months of, I think, they have lived it. They have talked about it so much. They have tried to shoot it down. They have tried to grow with it. They tried to, look at its failure, kind of failure modes. Then you, trust me, after all that manthan, so to say, what you will have, you will be able to create a USP. There will be no problem. In my case, that manthan was happening over 20 years. So I didn't have to think about that piece. That was not my showstopper. But I think for folks who will just start, that will be the showstopper. That the story that you are thinking about, because you will get your consultants later on to, even the investors, some of them have been successful entrepreneurs, so they'll give you a nice business model, or they will pivot you in some other direction and blah blah blah, and it might help. But when you're starting, nobody is going to be there, and it's going to be you, your idea, or you and your partners or whoever founders are. You have to be convinced about your concept, that you are adding value with that concept to the industry, to whatever you pick up. I don't know. Yesterday I was talking to someone who wanted to work in the area of EV scooters. Okay. Now, for some reason, because being in Bangalore, Ether Energy was our customer long back when they started, but not for IP, but for some tools that we made for them. And I was thinking there are several players have come since then. Market itself, the product itself are so many now. Leave aside people who are planning to do that. But when I was talking to this guy, I realized this guy has thought through. Yes, I mean, he was not a new guy, he was an industry guy, but he says, what I'm going to do is not novel. So when I'm talking to you, I know you will, I won't get a patent on it possibly. I'm only worried about if I make it, because I know it will be successful, will big guys come after me? Which is another way of saying that the technologies that I practice has somebody else protected it, and that's where he needed our help. But that was the clarity he had, and so it's not about doing a new thing. He knew where his niche is. He knew once he brings it to the market, people will want it. But he will disrupt. If he disrupts the industry, industry will react, and it typically happens with such ambitious startups, if I have to say. I mean, I personally am not an ambitious startup. It's a small service thing I'm doing. He's doing a much bigger thing. He wants to sell much more. So that's going to be his ambition. Then if you have an ambition, there will be big players who will come after you. If you manage to do something big. So he was trying to cover his ground. But that is, Sarvaji, that's the kind of clarity you will have if you are kind of thinking of an idea. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, I did very brilliantly. Thank you, sir.
So one last question.
Sure.
Sir, how to keep ourselves motivated throughout our working process?
How do you get motivated typically? I mean, that's a question. It's an interesting question. Somewhere I would say Dishant also was referring to that question, right? One day I'm off track and all that. I guess it's an important thing to stay motivated, and it is. I have the way I did it, and for right reasons or wrong reasons, I don't have a co-founder. I'm the only guy, so obviously things fall on me, right? Uh, it's about having the right team. One cannot be. Reality is one cannot be motivated all the time. It's just a reality. That's a reality check. You will have your off days. You will have days when. Do you have somebody in your team who will take it up from you, or in this case, you have your friends around you who are support you when you are down, you kind of motivate you, you have the right kind of friends, you have the right kind of family. I mean, not right kind of family, there's no right kind of family, there is family, but does your family support you in that? Is that encouraged? You reach out to those people or that system or that process that motivates. There's nothing else which can be done. Reality is there'll be days you will feel so down and you will feel like uh, I don't know what I'm doing. Do I really understand what I'm doing? It happens. It happens. I mean, those things. You are not always on a high. Like I said, in product it'll happen always. There will be a trough of disillusionment, like you say, in one of those classic curves. But you reach out. I think that's the way I have done. From my personal experience, that's the only way I do. And if you know better ways, like I said, yoga, those all that, please do that. But those are very individual practices. But what has generally worked is surround yourself with a team which will be able to which is able to boost you up when you are down. And I'm lucky to have my family, my colleagues who have who have that kind of qualities. Sometimes when I'm down, they boost me up. I boost them up when they are down. That's the only way, humans to humans. Nothing else that I can think of.
So just a follow up to this.
Yes.
Like you said, there are highs and there are lows, right? So, sir, like if we are on the low part, so sir, when I mean, how do we know it is the right time or it is the time to exit, or if there is really any point to exit, sir?
No, so anybody will tell you don't take a decision when you are under stress. Typically, business decisions are not taken when you are under stress. It doesn't matter whatever decision is, plus positive or negative decision. You got to get out of that place first, and then objectively decide what you're going to do. And it's easier said than done, frankly. But bringing objectivity is important, and to that you will think I have only one solution to offer, but that's pretty much what solution is. You have the right person that you go to, a right team that you go to, who can make you objective. There are some people, this was a concept that again I refer to GE where to start, that you need to have your personal ink, INC they used to say, right? Like Dishant ink. So what is Dishant ink? Who is in your life, who is your chief technology officer? Who's your CEO? If you are the CEO, who's your advisor? Who's your HR? In your life? I'm not talking about your job. In your life, there are these people who play these roles for you. One knows intuitively, these things I'll discuss with that friend, because he or she is better at, and that is what you do. Look for a person who will help you. Maybe it's typically a mentor, or more people who have seen cycles. They can be more objective. Go to them, talk to them, say this is my problem, and this is again what somebody said. The problem that you'll have is never new. Somebody else had it, today you have it, tomorrow somebody else is going to have it. So somebody else would have gone through this, and they would be able to tell you that hey, stay. So
Thank you so much, sir. On behalf of all the listeners, thank you for your advice and thoughts. I believe they will help in guiding us towards our future endeavors and shape our future. I now request our senior alumni, Dr. Tansen Chaudhari, sir, for thank you note and a few words of advice for our listeners. Thank you, sir.
thank you.
Thank Vikas. I was knowing that no, you will be definitely a different person. In fact, okay. So to tell you everybody, no, he was very sober, putting down, saying that after 20 years I decided and etc. etc. But believe me, every word of him, what I was also. I mean, okay, I got to reach at home at 4 o'clock because that's a lockdown at 4 o'clock. So I just reached home. By the way, okay. So I was listening. He really crafted the whole flow, self-assessment, going to the people, don't take decision at stress, need to have team member. If you can explain your mother, you can explain everybody, convince yourself. There cannot be better, I wouldn't say guidance or tips than anything else than what Vikas has covered, frankly. So Vikas, first and foremost, thank you from the Engineering College School of Management, myself personally, for taking out time, and in fact you have given a lot of food for thought to the tomorrow's entrepreneurs, I would say. Okay, naturally, uh, as you know, how do I encourage myself? I'm sure these points would encourage them to either be a thorough entrepreneur or take a reverse gear now itself.
Like, I mean,
Yes,
yes,
so
anybody can do anything, but you got to do it thoughtfully. That's what I would say.
yes, yes. So this was, I would say, more than PowerPoint. It was power of the point. What you brought to the table.
Fantastic,
Okay.
Tansen. Yeah.
Okay, so I must thank you from everyone here, and I would invite you to the school here. Of course, I know you have a reason to come to Pune. By the way, his in-laws are from Pune, guys. So you
Yes.
know who drives your life other than wife. Don't take me otherwise.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
guys.
true. That's true.
Jokes apart, Vikas, do drop in anytime when you
Sure.
are around.
Sure.
And we would like not only to exchange and interact, but to update also where things are post this sort of deep sea talk, etc. from your side. So thank you very much, and I'm sure everybody who want to be in touch with Vikas for anything,
Sure.
etc. Feel free to do that. He will write you email and points, etc. So the see one of the things what he referred about networking, guys. Networking is everybody's arena to do. How big, how small, don't you cannot copy anybody there. You know. So if anybody asks me not to network, that's my weakness now. Rather.
Yeah.
Okay. So be in touch, and let's take it forward from here, and we'll everybody should try to stay safe and be with the surroundings around. But then, because bottom of the heart, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. It was great talking to you folks. You know, it's like amazing. You made my day asking questions and, you know, thank you.
Thank you.